The alert sounded across the Kelmoran outpost. Red lights flashed and screens blinked with warning signals. Officer Q rushed to his station, sliding into his seat as his fingers flew across the control panel. "High monitor Ta. We have an unknown vessel at the border," Q called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. High monitor Ta walked swiftly to the main viewing screen. His tall, slender frame cast a long shadow across the command center. The four-armed Kelmoran commander adjusted his uniform, with his lower set of hands, while his upper limbs remained clasped behind his back. "Show me," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life. A ship appeared, moving slowly toward their border. It didn't look like anything in their records. The design was strange, blocky yet somehow elegant, with massive engines and what appeared to be weapon ports along its hull. "Run identification protocols," Ta said. Officer Min, the communications specialist, spoke up from her station. "Sir, based on the design and energy signature, it matches intercepted transmissions from Sector 7. We believe it's human." A hush fell over the command center. Humans were almost mythical to the Kelmoran. They had only learned of their existence 3 cycles ago, when they began intercepting transmissions from the edge of known space. The Kelmoran High Council had debated making contact, but ultimately decided to observe from a distance. Humans. Here. Ta's outer eyelids blinked rapidly, a sign of surprise in his species. "What is their trajectory?" "Directly toward our station, sir," Q replied. "Speed decreasing. They appear to be approaching with caution." Ta considered his options. Kelmoran protocol was clear. No unauthorized species were permitted to cross their borders. But a human ship here now. The scientific and intelligence value was immense. "Activate containment protocols. Bring defense systems online, but do not target unless I give the order," Ta decided. "And open a communication channel." Min worked at her station. "Channel open, sir." Ta straightened to his full height. "Attention, unknown vessel. You are approaching Kelmoran space. Identify yourself immediately or be fired upon." The screen changed. For the first time, the Kelmorans saw a human face up close. The human had dark hair cut short, small eyes, and surprisingly smooth skin. Ta noted the lack of protective scales with interest. "This is Captain Jisoo of the Earth vessel Thunderbolt," the human said. Her voice sounded strained. In the background, sparks flew from damaged systems. "We apologize for the intrusion into your space. We've suffered critical drive failure while escaping from danger. Request emergency docking for repairs." Tae's 4 hands clenched. This was unexpected. "Captain Jisoo, our information shows your species has not yet achieved formal contact with the galactic community. How did you find our outpost?" Jisoo coughed as smoke filled her bridge. "We detected your station while our sensors were at maximum range. We had no choice. Our systems are failing. We can't make it to the next star system." Officer Q leaned toward Ta. "Sir, protocol forbids." "I know the protocols." Ta cut him off. He studied the human captain. Was this a trick? An invasion? It seemed unlikely. The smoke and damage on their bridge appeared real. "Scan their vessel," Ta ordered. Officer Sun at the sensor station worked quickly. "Sir, I'm detecting significant damage to their propulsion systems. Energy readings are unstable." And Sun paused, his eyes widening. "Sir, their weapon systems are far more advanced than we expected. Multiple energy weapons, missile bays, and something our systems can't identify." Todd felt a chill run through him. If this human ship was this powerful, what were their military vessels like? On screen, the human captain waited. Another explosion rocked her bridge. "High monitor, we're running out of time. We come in peace. We need help." Ta made his decision. "Captain Jisoo, against standard protocol, I am granting emergency docking privileges. Any hostile action will be met with immediate force." Relief washed over the human's face. "Thank you, High Monitor. We won't forget this." The communication ended. Tai turned to his crew, all of whom were staring at him. "Sir," Officer Min said softly, "the High Council will be informed immediately." Tai finished for her. "But we will not turn away a ship in distress. That is not our way." As the Thunderbolt approached the station, everyone watched the main screen. The human ship grew larger and larger. What had seemed like a medium-sized vessel on sensors was actually massive. It dwarfed the Kelmoran patrol ships stationed around the outpost. "By the ancestors," Officer Sun whispered, "it's huge." Tai felt a growing unease. The ship was clearly built for war, not exploration. What kind of species created such vessels? What were they running from that could damage such a powerful ship? "Direct them to Docking Bay 3, Tai ordered. "Security teams in position. Medical teams on standby." As the Thunderbolt came alongside the station, they got their first true look at its size. It was easily 3 times larger than they had estimated. The hull was scarred with fresh damage, but the weapon systems looked intact. "Sir," Officer Q said quietly, "if they wanted to, they could destroy this entire outpost." Ta nodded. "Yes, let us hope Captain Jisoo meant what she said about coming in peace." The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thud that echoed through the station. Tai straightened his uniform and headed for the lift. "I will greet our guests personally," he announced. Min informed the High Council immediately. "Tell them we have made first contact with humans." As Tai rode the lift down to the docking bay, his mind raced. In all his years of service, he never imagined being the first to officially meet humans. The intercepted transmissions had painted them as resourceful and aggressive, but also creative and adaptable. Today would make history for the Kelmoran people. The lift doors opened. Ta stepped out to see the massive airlock that connected to the human ship. Security officers lined the walls, their weapons ready but not raised. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the airlock began to open. High Monitor Ta stood tall, his 4 arms now in the formal greeting position. Lower hands open at his sides, upper hands crossed at his chest. The doors fully opened, and there they were, humans, stepping onto a Kelmoran station for the first time in history. Captain Jisoo stood at the front. She was shorter than Tai had expected, but she carried herself with undeniable authority. Behind her were 4 other humans, each wearing the same dark uniform. "High Monitor Tai," Jisoo said with a slight bow. "Thank you for saving our lives." Tai returned the bow. "Captain Jisoo, welcome to Outpost 73. This is an unexpected meeting." Jisoo smiled, showing small flat teeth. "The best meetings often are. I look forward to explaining our situation fully. But first," she gestured to the ship behind her, "we have wounded crew members who need medical attention." Tai signaled to the medical team. "Of course. Our doctors will do what they can, though your biology may present challenges." As the medical team rushed past them into the human ship, Tai couldn't help but notice the expressions on the faces of the other humans. They looked worried, not just about their damaged ship or injured friends, but something deeper. "Captain," Ta said carefully, "what exactly were you running from when your ship was damaged?" Jisoo's smile faded. She glanced at her officers, then back to Ta. "That, High Monitor, is something we need to discuss urgently, because what damaged our ship isn't just a threat to humans. It's coming this way." Tai felt his heart beating faster. This day was already historic, the first official contact between Kelmorans and humans. But he suddenly had the feeling that today might be remembered for something far more significant and far more dangerous. The emergency broadcast that had announced a human warship breaching their borders might soon seem like the least of their worries. The docking bay hummed with activity as the human ship secured its position against the Kelmoran station. Security officers lined the walls, their 4-fingered hands resting on weapon holsters. Though they tried to appear calm, their outer eyelids blinked rapidly, a clear sign of nervous tension among their kind. High Monitor Ta stood at the front of the welcoming party, his tall frame perfectly still. He had changed into formal diplomatic robes, the deep purple fabric shimmering under the station lights. "They're coming through," announced Officer Gunn, watching the airlock indicators. With a soft hiss, the airlock doors slid open. Captain Jisoo stepped forward first, followed by 5 other humans. They carried several containers of varying sizes. "High Monitor Tae," Jisoo said with a bow. "Thank you for allowing us aboard. We've brought some items from Earth as a gesture of goodwill." Tae's upper arms performed the traditional greeting gesture, while his lower arms remained still, the formal posture for receiving dignitaries. "Captain Jisoo, we welcome you to our station, though the circumstances are unusual." One of the humans stepped forward and opened a small box. Inside was a gleaming object that caught the light. "This is a ceremonial blade from my homeland," Jisoo explained. "Not meant as a weapon, but as art. The handle is carved from a tree that grows only on Earth." Tai studied the blade with interest, but didn't reach for it. Among the Kelmoran, weapons, even ceremonial ones, are only exchanged after 50 cycles of friendship. Jisoo's smile faltered. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. In our culture, such gifts represent trust and respect." Another human opened a different container, revealing several glass bottles. "Perhaps this is more acceptable. These contain beverages from different regions of our world." Tae's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of discomfort. Consuming foreign substances before proper biological compatibility testing is forbidden by health protocols. The humans exchanged glances. Jisoo's smile remained, but tension lined her face. "We certainly understand caution. Perhaps these will be more suitable." She gestured to a third container, which contained data crystals, cultural archives, music, art, literature. No physical contact required. Tai finally nodded. "These we can accept. They will be examined by our cultural division." Officer Min stepped forward to accept the data crystals, carefully avoiding contact with the human's hand. "Shall we move to more comfortable surroundings?" Ta suggested, gesturing toward the corridor. As they walked, the humans moved with a bouncing gait that seemed oddly energetic to the Kelmorans. One of the humans, a tall male with broad shoulders, accidentally bumped into a storage container. What happened next shocked everyone watching. The container, which would take 2 Kelmorans to move, slid across the floor when the human collided with it. The human casually reached out with one hand and stopped it, then pushed it back into place with seemingly little effort. "Apologies," he said, not noticing the wide-eyed stares from the security team. Officer Gunn leaned toward his colleague. "Did you see that? With one arm. How strong are these creatures?" The Kelmoran security team subtly adjusted their grip on their weapons. They reached the conference room, where refreshments had been prepared for both species based on the limited information available about human biology. Tai invited everyone to sit. "Captain Jisoo." Ta began once they were settled. "You mentioned your ship was damaged while escaping danger. Our reports show your vessel, despite its damage, possesses significant military capabilities. What exactly were you fleeing that could damage such a powerful ship?" Jisoo exchanged glances with her officers before answering. "High Monitor, you're right that the Thunderbolt is a military vessel. It was designed for deep space patrol and defense." "Defense against what?" Ta pressed. "Initially, against anything unknown we might encounter as we expanded into space," Jisoo said carefully. "Humans learned early to be prepared. But 3 months ago, we encountered something specific, something we weren't prepared for." Another human officer, a female with short gray hair, spoke up. "We call them the Void Swarm. They appeared at the edge of our territory without warning." Tae's 4 hands tightened slightly. "And what are these Void Swarm?" "That's a complicated question," Jisoo replied. "High Monitor, would it be possible to speak with you privately? The information I need to share is sensitive." Ta considered this request. It was unusual, but these were unusual circumstances. My senior officers would normally remain, but I will grant this exception. He gestured for his team to leave, which they did reluctantly. When the door closed, only Tai and Jisoo remained. "Thank you," Jisoo said. "What I'm about to tell you isn't just about the danger to humans. It's about a threat to all life in this sector of space." Tai settled into his seat. "I'm listening." Jisoo's professional demeanor shifted, revealing genuine concern. The Void Swarm isn't just some aggressive species or ordinary enemy. There's something else entirely. We first detected them when they consumed an entire mining colony on the edge of our territory. 15,000 people, gone in hours. "Consumed?" Tai asked, his voice steady despite his growing concern. "Literally consumed," Jisoo confirmed. "The swarm appears to be a collection of biomechanical entities that break down organic and inorganic matter alike, converting it into more of themselves. They grow exponentially with each world they take. And you believe they're heading toward Kelmoran space." Ta's outer eyelids blinked rapidly. Jisoo nodded. "We're certain of it. The Thunderbolt wasn't damaged fleeing randomly. We were on a reconnaissance mission tracking the swarm's movement. We detected your outpost and realized the swarm's trajectory would bring them here next." She pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. It projected a three-dimensional map of the sector. Small red dots moved across it in a clear pattern. "These are confirmed swarm sightings over the past 3 months," Jisoo explained. "Their path is consistent. They'll reach your border within 15 days. Tai studied the projection. "If what you say is true, why come here yourself? Why not send a warning transmission?" Jisoo's expression grew grim. "We tried. All communications sent ahead of the swarm's path are somehow blocked or corrupted. And there's more. We have reason to believe they specifically target communication and defense systems first. They're not just consuming. They're hunting." "That suggests intelligence," Ta noted. "Yes, but not like ours. More like a virus with a purpose," Jisoo replied. "High Monitor, I know this is difficult to believe from strangers who arrived unannounced in your territory. But we came here deliberately, not just to save ourselves, but to warn you." Tai was silent for a long moment, processing this information. "Captain Jisoo, while I don't dismiss your warning, you must understand that such claims require verification. The Kelmoran Confederacy has protocols for—" A sharp beep interrupted him. Tai touched the communication panel on his wrist. "Yes." Officer Sun's voice came through clearly. "Sir, we've analyzed the damage patterns on the human vessel. They're consistent with high-energy particle weapons, but the residual energy signature doesn't match any known species in our database." Tai looked up at Jisoo, who remained silent but whose expression said everything. "I told you so. Forward the findings to my personal terminal," Tai instructed before ending the communication. "Captain," Ta said finally, "I will bring this information to our High Council immediately. However, I must warn you that they will be skeptical. Our people value caution and thorough verification before taking action." Jisoo leaned forward. "High Monitor, I respect your processes, but the Void Swarm doesn't. We faced the same skepticism among our own leadership until it was almost too late. We lost 3 colony worlds because we didn't act quickly enough." She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data chip. "This contains all our information on the swarm. Encounter reports, biological analyses, defensive strategies we've tried. Some worked, most didn't. We're sharing everything we know." Tai took the chip carefully. "This is unusually forthcoming for a first contact situation." Jisoo's expression was deadly serious. "Because this isn't about first contact anymore. It's about survival, yours and ours. The Void Swarm doesn't care about borders or species differences. To them, we're all just resources to consume." The gravity of her words hung in the air between them. Ta had spent his career following protocols and procedures, but something about the human captain's directness rang true. "I will expedite the council meeting," Ta said at last. "Until then, Your crew may begin repairs on your vessel, but under supervision. And Captain Jisoo. Yes, High Monitor. If you're wrong about this threat, the consequences for inserting yourselves into our territory under false pretenses will be severe. Jisoo nodded solemnly. I understand. But if I'm right, we'll need to work together quickly. The Void Swarm gives no second chances. As they stood to rejoin the others, Ta found himself hoping, against all logical protocol, that these strange humans with their direct manners and surprising strength were mistaken. Because if they weren't, everything was about to change for the Kelmoran people. And not for the better. The council chambers aboard the Kelmoran outpost gleamed with polished metal and ceremonial lights. 3 days had passed since the humans' arrival, and now 7 members of the High Council sat in elevated seats, looking down at Captain Jisoo and her officers. High Monitor Ta stood to the side, his posture perfect, but his inner eyelids flickering with concern. The council's quick arrival showed how seriously they took the situation, or how dangerous they considered it. Elder Suk, the head of the council, raised her upper hands for silence. Her lower hands remained folded in her lap, showing her authority. Captain Jisoo of Earth, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. You claim to bring warnings of a great danger approaching our territory. Yet you arrived in a heavily armed vessel, crossed our borders without permission, and speak of threats we have never encountered in 3,000 cycles of space exploration. Jisoo stepped forward. Unlike the Kelmorans, who value elaborate formal speech, she spoke directly. Elder Suk, members of the High Council, I understand your skepticism. In your position, I would feel the same. But the Void Swarm is real, and it's coming. We've brought evidence. Jisoo nodded to her science officer, who activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the center of the room. Planets with massive, spreading dark patches, space stations torn apart, and finally, strange ship-like objects moving in perfect coordination. 3 months ago, the swarm appeared at our colony on Proxima B. Within hours, 15,000 people were gone. The swarm consumed them, their buildings, even the topsoil of the planet. Jisoo's voice remained steady, but her hands clenched at her sides. They convert matter into more of themselves. They grow exponentially, and they're heading directly toward Kelmoran space. The council members watched silently. Then Elder Pack, the military representative, spoke up. These images could be fabricated. We have only your word that this swarm exists at all. Our scientists have analyzed the damage to your ship, Tai interjected. The patterns are consistent with Captain Jisoo's claims. Elder Suk's eyes narrowed. High Monitor, you exceed your authority. The council will evaluate this situation. Another council member, Elder Jun from the Science Division, leaned forward. If such a threat existed, our long-range sensors would have detected it. We have outposts throughout this sector. None have reported anything unusual. Jisoo exchanged glances with her officers. The swarm emits a signal that disrupts communications. By the time you detect them through conventional means, they're already close enough to attack. A ripple of murmurs passed through the council. Elder Suk raised her hands again for silence. What exactly are these creatures? You speak of them as if they're both biological and mechanical. Jisoo nodded to her science officer again. The hologram changed to show microscopic images of strange, geometric structures that seem to pulse with internal light. They appear to be artificial life forms, created, not evolved. They function as individual units but act with a single purpose, like a hive mind. They can survive in space, on planets, underwater, environments that would kill most species. Elder Jun studied the images with professional interest. And how do you combat such creatures? With difficulty, Jisoo admitted. Conventional weapons damage them, but they adapt quickly. Their outer shells can withstand most energy weapons after first exposure. Physical weapons work better, but you have to get close. Elder Pack scoffed. Convenient, that only your military vessels would be effective against this supposed threat. Jisu's patience visibly thinned. Elder, we didn't invent a galaxy-ending threat just to visit your outpost. We could have introduced ourselves through normal diplomatic channels if that was our goal. Yet you didn't, Elder Suk pointed out. Instead, you crossed our borders in a warship. Before Jisu could respond, the chamber doors slid open. Officer Sun rushed in, breaking all protocols of council meetings. "Forgive the interruption," he said, bowing deeply. "But our long-range sensors have detected something unusual at the edge of our space. Strange energy readings that don't match any known signature." The council chamber fell silent. Jisu looked at Ta, who now stood perfectly still. "Show us," Elder Suk commanded. Officer Sun activated the main display screen. It showed empty space, but with odd distortions appearing intermittently. "The readings began 30 minutes ago," Sun explained. "They're faint, but growing stronger." Jisu stepped closer to the display. "That's them. That's how it started at Proxima." Elder Pack stood. "Or it could be some trick. A signal from another human ship, perhaps. We've also received reports that 2 of our border outposts have gone silent," Sun added quietly. The mood in the chamber shifted instantly. Elder Suk turned to her military advisor. "When did this happen?" "The last successful communication was 8 hours ago," Sun replied. Jisu looked grim. "They're already here. Those outposts are gone." Elder Pack's outer eyelids blinked rapidly. "This proves nothing. 2 outposts could lose communication for many reasons." As if in response, the station's alert system activated. Red lights pulsed along the walls as a computerized voice announced, "Alert! Unidentified vessels approaching. All personnel to defense stations." The council chamber erupted in activity. Elder Suk barked orders for secure communications with their homeworld. Elder Pack was already contacting the military. "How many Kelmoran ships are currently stationed here?" Jisu asked Tai urgently. 3 patrol vessels. A battleship is en route, but it's 12 hours away," Tai replied. Jisu turned to face the council. "Let us help. The Thunderbolt is damaged, but our weapons still function. We fought the swarm before." Elder Pack glared at her. "So you can turn those weapons on us once we're vulnerable?" "No. Security, take the humans into custody." Guards moved forward, surrounding Jisu and her officers. The humans didn't resist as their communication devices were confiscated. "You're making a mistake," Jisu said calmly. "We need to work together." Elder Suk studied her. "If this threat is real, why would you still offer help when we treat you as prisoners?" "Because the swarm doesn't care about our differences," Jisu replied. "If they consume this station, they'll use its materials to grow stronger before moving on to your homeworld. We're all food to them." A young officer burst into the room before Elder Suk could respond. "Elders, the unknown vessels have accelerated. They'll reach us in 20 minutes. Ta stepped forward. "How many ships?" "At least 15, sir. Small, fast-moving. Their configuration doesn't match anything in our database." Jisu looked at Ta. "Scout ships. The main swarm will follow. They're testing your defenses." Elder Pack pointed at the humans. "Take them to secure quarters. We'll deal with this situation ourselves." As the guards led the humans away, Jisu called over her shoulder. "Elder Suk, target their central nodes. Each ship has a control center that glows brighter than the rest of the hull." The chamber doors closed behind them. The humans were escorted through corridors now filled with rushing Kelmoran personnel preparing for possible attack. In the secure quarters, essentially a high-class prison cell, Jisu paced while her officers sat quietly. "They're not ready," she said finally. "They don't understand what they're facing." Her weapons officer, a quiet man named Han, looked up. "They'll learn. The hard way, like we did." The station shuddered suddenly. The lights flickered. "That was weapons fire," Han noted. "The engagement has begun." Jisoo pressed her ear against the door, trying to hear what was happening. The station shook again, more violently this time. "Our ship is still docked," she said. "If we could reach it." The door slid open unexpectedly. Ta stood there with 2 security officers. "The scout ships have broken through our initial defense line," he said without preamble. "2 of our patrol vessels are heavily damaged." Jisoo straightened. "Did you target the central nodes?" "We tried. They're difficult to hit. They move in patterns we can't predict." Ta's outer eyelids were blinking rapidly now, clear fear in a species that prided itself on emotional control. "Let us help," Jisoo said simply. Ta hesitated, then nodded. "The Council has authorized your temporary release. Your knowledge of these creatures may prove useful." As they hurried through the corridors toward the command center, the station shook again. Emergency lights activated as normal power fluctuated. "They're targeting your power systems," Jisoo explained as they ran. "It's always their first strategy. Disable, then consume." They reached the command center to find chaos. The main screen showed the space around the station, filled with small geometric ships moving with impossible precision. 3 Kelmoran patrol ships fired continuously, but the swarm vessels seemed to anticipate each shot, dodging with millisecond timing. Elder Sook stood in the center of the room, her usual composure shaken. When she saw Jisoo, her expression hardened. "Your warning appears to be valid, human. Now tell us how to fight these things." Jisoo moved to the tactical station without waiting for permission. "We need to change tactics. They predict energy weapon trajectories. Switch to physical projectiles if you have them." Elder Pack, who had been coordinating the defense, looked offended. "Projectile weapons? That's primitive technology." "Primitive works," Jisoo insisted. "And we need to coordinate fire. 3 ships targeting 1 swarm vessel at the same time. They can't dodge multiple attacks from different angles." Ta gave the order without waiting for council approval. The Kelmoran ships adjusted their strategy. Within minutes, one of the swarm scout ships exploded in a shower of strange, glittering particles. A cheer went up among the Kelmoran officers. "It's working," Elder Jun exclaimed. Jisoo didn't share their enthusiasm. "That was 1 scout ship. There are 14 more, and the main swarm hasn't even arrived yet." As if summoned by her words, Officer Sun called out from the sensor station. "New contacts. Large mass of objects emerging from hyperspace." The main screen shifted to show dozens, then hundreds, of larger vessels appearing at the edge of sensor range. The command center fell silent as everyone stared at the approaching armada. "That," Jisoo said quietly, "is the Void Swarm." Elder Sook turned to her, all previous suspicion gone from her face. "What do we do now, Captain?" The command center of the Kelmoran station hummed with tense activity. The main screen showed the ongoing battle, and it wasn't going well. 2 Kelmoran patrol ships drifted, dark and lifeless. The 3rd fired desperately at the approaching swarm vessels, its shots missing more than hitting. "Hull integrity at 20% on the Starlight," Officer Sun reported, his voice tight. "They can't take much more." High Monitor Todd watched grimly as the last patrol ship's engines flared brightly, then died. The ship began to drift, just like the others. "All patrol vessels have been neutralized," Officer Sun announced. His outer eyelids blinked rapidly, the Kelmoran sign of extreme distress. Elder Sook turned to Captain Jisoo, who stood studying the tactical display. "Your assessment was correct, Captain. We are unprepared for this enemy." Jisoo nodded, her focus still on the display. "The scout ships are just testing your defenses. The main swarm is hanging back, analyzing. We have maybe 30 minutes before they advance." Elder Pack slammed his lower hands on the console. "Our reinforcements are still 8 hours away. The station's weapons aren't designed for this kind of fight." Jisoo finally looked up. "The Thunderbolt's weapons still work. Let us help." Elder Sook exchanged glances with the other council members. Their earlier suspicion of the humans had faded in the face of this greater threat. "Very well," Elder Sook said. "What do you propose?" "First, I need to contact my ship," Jisoo said. "Then I need your best scientist." Within minutes, Jisoo's crew was connected through secure channels. Elder Sook had summoned Dr. Dae, the station's chief scientist, a younger Kelmoran with a reputation for unconventional thinking. "The Thunderbolt will move to defend the station," Jisoo explained, pointing to the tactical display. "But we need to modify your defensive systems. Standard shields won't hold against the swarm for long." Dr. Dae studied the sensor readings of the swarm ships. "Their energy signatures are unlike anything I've seen. How do they penetrate shields so easily?" Jisoo's chief engineer, a stocky man named Bach, appeared on a communication screen. "They use harmonic resonance to match shield frequencies," he explained. "Once they match it, they can slip right through as if the shield isn't there." Dr. Dae's eyes widened. "That should be impossible without knowing the exact modulation patterns." "They learn fast," Jisoo said grimly. "But we found a countermeasure." Engineer Bach explained the modifications. Bach nodded. "We need to create random frequency shifts in your shield generators. Complete pattern changes every 2.7 seconds. It won't stop them completely, but it will slow them down." Dr. Dae considered this. "Our systems aren't designed for such rapid modulation. I can help modify them," Bach offered. "With your assistance, we could have it working in 20 minutes. Dr. Dae looked to Elder Sook, who nodded her approval. "Go. Work quickly." As Dr. Dae and Bach began their work, Jisoo turned to Ta. "We need to coordinate our defensive strategy. The Thunderbolt's weapons have been calibrated specifically to target swarm weak points." Ta stepped closer to the tactical display. "Our station has 4 main weapon arrays, but they're designed for conventional combat." "We'll make them work," Jisoo assured him. "The key is targeting multiple ships simultaneously with different weapon types. The swarm adapts quickly to any single attack method." Elder Pack joined them at the display. "Our military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force concentrated on primary targets. You're suggesting we divide our fire." "Exactly," Jisoo said. "The swarm expects logical, efficient attacks. We need to be unpredictable." Ta considered this approach. It went against everything in Kelmoran military training, which emphasized precision and efficiency. "Show me," he said finally. Jisoo quickly outlined a battle plan that seemed chaotic to the Kelmorans. The Thunderbolt would move in seemingly random patterns, firing different weapons at multiple targets. The station would coordinate its fire to create crossfire situations the swarm couldn't easily predict. "This goes against all established doctrine," Elder Pack protested. "That's the point," Jisoo replied. "The swarm analyzes patterns and adapts, so we don't give them patterns to analyze." Before Elder Pack could argue further, Officer Sun called out from his station. "Movement from the main swarm. They're beginning to advance." All eyes turned to the main screen. The mass of swarm vessels was indeed moving forward, spreading out in a formation that would surround the station. "We're out of time for debate," Jisoo said. "High Monitor Ta. Request permission to move the Thunderbolt into defensive position." Tad looked to Elder Sook, who gave a quick nod. "Permission granted, Captain. Coordinate with our weapons officer." Jisoo turned to her communication screen. "Commander Han, bring the Thunderbolt online. Execute defense pattern Echo 7. On the main screen, the docked human ship suddenly lit up. Its engines glowed blue as it detached from the station and moved into position. The Kelmorans watched in surprise as the previously damaged vessel moved with unexpected speed and agility. Its weapon ports opened, revealing systems far more advanced than they had initially appeared. "Those aren't standard defense systems," Elder Pack noted, his tone somewhere between accusation and admiration. "No," Jisoo agreed without elaboration. "Weapons ready, Commander Han." "Ready, Captain," came the reply. "All systems operational." Jisoo turned to the Kelmoran weapons officer. On my mark, target the lead vessels with your ion cannons. Aim for their propulsion systems. The Kelmoran officer looked to Ta, who nodded. Do as she says. 3, 2, 1, mark. Jisoo called. The station's weapons fired in concert with the thunderbolts. The combined attack caught the advancing swarm ships in a crossfire. 3 exploded immediately, while 2 more spun out of formation, damage. It's working, Officer Sun exclaimed. For now, Jisoo cautioned. They'll adapt. Keep changing targets and weapon configurations. For the next 20 minutes, the battle continued. The human ship moved in seemingly random patterns, firing a variety of weapons the Kelmorans had never seen before. The station coordinated its attacks based on Jisoo's instructions. But as Jisoo had predicted, the swarm began to adapt. Their formations changed, becoming harder to target. Their approaches became more unpredictable. They're learning, Tae observed. Jisoo nodded grimly. And there are too many of them. We can't keep this up indefinitely. At that moment, Dr. Dai and Engineer Bach returned to the command center. The shield modifications are complete, Dr. Dai announced. But there's something else. He looked at Bach, who nodded encouragingly. We've discovered a potential weakness in the swarm's communication system, Dr. Dai continued. They use quantum entanglement to coordinate their movements, but the signal has to pass through a central node in each formation. Jisoo's eyes lit up. If we could disrupt that node, it might disorient the entire formation, Bach finished. But we'd need to get close, really close, to the main control ship. Elder Suk frowned. The station cannot move, and your ship, while impressive, cannot penetrate deep enough into their formation without being destroyed. Jisoo exchanged looks with her officers on the communication screen. Something unspoken passed between them. Actually, Jisoo said slowly, we might have a way. The Thunderbolt carries a prototype device we were testing when we encountered the swarm initially. It's designed to create localized disruptions in quantum fields. Tae's interest was immediately piqued. This device could disable their coordination. Temporarily, Jisoo clarified. Maybe long enough to give us an advantage. But as your elder said, we'd need to get very close to their command ship. Which means someone would have to fly directly into the heart of the swarm, Elder Pack said. A suicide mission. Not necessarily, Jisoo replied. The Thunderbolt's armor was specifically designed to withstand swarm attacks. We could penetrate their formation, activate the device, and attempt to withdraw. Elder Suk's expression was grave. The risk is extreme. The alternative is worse, Jisoo countered. If the swarm takes this station, they'll use its materials to grow stronger before moving on to your homeworld and colonies. Silence fell over the command center. The weight of the decision hung in the air as the battle continued outside, slowly turning against them. Finally, Ta spoke. The decision is yours, Elder Suk. But I believe we should accept Captain Jisoo's offer. Elder Suk studied the human captain carefully. You would risk your ship and crew for a people you just met days ago. Jisoo's expression remained steady. The swarm is a threat to all life, not just Kelmorans or humans. We fight together, or we fall separately. After a long moment, Elder Suk nodded. Very well. Proceed with your plan, Captain. There's one more thing, Jisoo added. We'll need to create a distraction to draw their attention while we approach. Your station will need to launch an all-out attack on the opposite side of their formation. Elder Pack frowned. That would leave the station vulnerable. Yes, Jisoo acknowledged. This plan requires trust from both sides. Ta stepped forward. I will coordinate the station's attack personally. Elder Pack started to object, but Tai raised his hand. The captain and her crew are risking everything. We can do no less. Jisoo nodded gratefully. We'll need 10 minutes to prepare the device. Then we move. As the humans left to make their preparations, Elder Suk approached Ta. You trust these humans a great deal, High Monitor. Ta watched the battle on the main screen, where the Thunderbolt continued to fight against impossible odds. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." The Thunderbolt broke away from the station, its engines glowing bright blue against the darkness of space. Inside the ship, Captain Jisoo sat in the command chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing hundreds of swarm vessels surrounding them. "All systems operational, Captain," reported Commander Han from the weapons station. "Quantum disruptor is primed and ready." Jisoo nodded. "Begin attack pattern Omega. Full power to forward shields." The ship surged forward, accelerating directly toward the densest part of the swarm formation. On the station's command deck, the Kellamorans watched with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "They're heading straight into the heart of the enemy," Elderpack said, his outer eyelids blinking rapidly. "It's either the bravest or most foolish tactic I've ever witnessed." High Monitor Ta stood calmly, his four hands clasped behind his back. "It's time for our part. All weapons, prepare to fire on my mark. Target the outer edges of the swarm formation." The station's weapon systems hummed as they charged to full power. The timing had to be perfect, create enough distraction to draw attention away from the Thunderbolt without revealing their true strategy. Aboard the human ship, Jisoo watched as the first wave of swarm vessels noticed their approach. The geometric ships began to move toward them, their formation shifting to create a net. "They're responding as expected," Jisoo said. "Engineering, reroute all non-essential power to engines and shields." The Thunderbolt suddenly accelerated, pushing through the first line of swarm ships. Several smaller vessels crashed against the human ship's shields, exploding into showers of strange metallic fragments. "Shields holding at 70%, reported Officer Rin, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Enemy vessels are congregating on our position." Jisoo allowed herself a small smile. "They're taking the bait. Signal the station." "Now." Back on the station, Tay received the signal. "All weapons, fire." The Kellamoran station unleashed its full arsenal, striking the back edges of the swarm formation. The surprise attack caught many vessels unprepared. Dozens exploded immediately, creating a chain reaction that rippled through their tightly packed formation. "It's working," Officer Sun exclaimed. "The swarm is splitting its forces, half maintaining position around us, half pursuing the Thunderbolt." Ta nodded grimly. "Continue firing. We need to keep their attention divided." The Thunderbolt pushed deeper into the swarm formation, taking damage but still advancing. Its weapons fired continuously, clearing a path forward. "Central Command ship identified," Commander Han announced, pointing to a larger vessel at the heart of the swarm. Unlike the others, this ship pulsed with an eerie green light. "That's our target," Jisoo confirmed. "All power to engines. We need to get within 100 meters for the disruptor to work." The Thunderbolt surged forward again, but the swarm had recognized the danger. Hundreds of smaller vessels moved to intercept, sacrificing themselves by crashing into the human ship's shields. "Shields at 40%, 35%. Officer Rin called out as impacts shook the ship. "We're taking heavy damage." Jisoo gripped her chair as the ship shuddered violently. "Stay on course." "How close to the command ship?" 500 meters and closing, Han replied. "But at this rate, our shields will fail before we reach optimum range." Jisoo thought quickly. "Vent plasma from the port nacelles. Make them think we've taken critical damage." The Thunderbolt released clouds of glowing plasma, giving the appearance of a mortally wounded ship. Several swarm vessels pulled back, apparently believing the human ship was no longer a threat. "It's working," Han said with surprise. "They're giving us a clear approach to the command ship. 300 meters, 200. On the station, the Kellamorans watched the Thunderbolt's desperate maneuver with growing tension. "They won't make it," Elderpack said quietly. "The damage is too severe." But Ta wasn't so sure. "Continue firing. Give them every second we can." The Thunderbolt was now visibly damaged, with sections of its hull blackened and torn. Yet it continued forward, closing the distance to the swarm's command ship. 150 meters, Han reported. Quantum disruptor armed and ready. Jisoo took a deep breath. All power to the disruptor. Fire when ready. Han pressed the activation sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a pulse of blue-white energy erupted from the Thunderbolt, engulfing the command ship in shimmering waves. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The command ship's green glow stuttered and died. Around it, the perfectly coordinated movements of the swarm vessels suddenly became chaotic. Ships collided with each other or spun off in random directions. "It's working," Jisoo exclaimed. "The hive mind connection is severed. Signal the station. Attack now." On the station's command deck, Officer Sun's console lit up. Signal from the Thunderbolt. The disruptor was successful. Ta didn't hesitate. All weapons, fire at will. Target any swarm vessel in range. The station's weapons lashed out, destroying dozens of now disorganized swarm ships. Without their perfect coordination, the once formidable enemy was suddenly vulnerable. The Thunderbolt limped back toward the station, still firing at swarm vessels that crossed its path. The quantum disruptor continued to pulse, preventing the swarm from re-establishing its network. The confusion won't last forever. Jisoo warned over the communication channel. "We need to eliminate as many as possible before they adapt." For the next hour, the combined forces of the human ship and Kelmoran station methodically destroyed the disoriented swarm. When the Kelmoran reinforcement fleet finally arrived, they found only scattered remnants of the once massive enemy force. 3 days later, Captain Jisoo stood before the High Council in their formal chamber. The Thunderbolt had been moved to the station's main repair bay, where Kelmoran engineers worked alongside humans to repair the extensive damage. Elder Sook rose from her seat, her formal robes glittering under the chamber lights. "Captain Jisoo of Earth, the High Council has reviewed the events of the past week. Your warning about the Void Swarm proved accurate. Your tactical assistance proved decisive. And your willingness to risk your ship and crew to protect this station cannot be overlooked." Jisoo stood at attention, her uniform cleaned and pressed despite the lingering exhaustion on her face. "Thank you, Elder Sook. We did what anyone would do when faced with a common enemy." Elder Sook's outer eyelids blinked once, a sign of disagreement among her people. "No, Captain. You did what few would do for strangers. Our initial suspicion of your intentions nearly cost us everything." She gestured to the other council members, who all rose to their feet. "The High Council has unanimously voted to extend formal diplomatic recognition to humanity. Furthermore, we propose a military alliance against the Void Swarm threat." Jisoo smiled. "Earth will be honored to accept both. Together, we stand a much better chance against the swarm than either of us does alone." Elder Pak stepped forward. "We have also authorized the sharing of our shield technology and faster-than-light drive systems with your people. Your quantum disruptor has already been adapted for use on our vessels." "A fair exchange," Jisoo agreed. "Working together, we can protect both our peoples." After the formal ceremony concluded, Jisoo found High Monitor Ta waiting in the corridor outside the council chamber. "Captain," he greeted her, performing the traditional Kelmoran gesture with his upper hands. "I wanted to speak with you privately before you departed." "Of course, High Monitor." Jisoo fell into step beside him as they walked toward the observation deck. "Your actions have changed my people," Ta said after a moment of silence. "For generations, the Kelmoran Confederacy has isolated itself from other species. We believed our technology, our culture, our ways were superior and needed protection from outside influence." They reached the observation deck, where the vast expanse of space stretched out before them. The Thunderbolt was visible in the repair bay below, surrounded by scaffolding and work pods. "The Void Swarm would have destroyed us," Ta continued. "Our isolation had become our weakness, not our strength. We were unprepared for a threat that required adaptation." Jisoo nodded. "Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Some of our greatest advances came when we faced our greatest challenges. Your approach to warfare is unlike anything in our tactical databases, Tay admitted. Unpredictable, adaptive, sometimes seemingly irrational, yet effective. The human way of war, Jisoo said with a small smile. Born from centuries of fighting each other before we reached the stars. Not something we're proud of, but it gave us skills that prove useful against the swarm. Tay turned to face her directly. I have been appointed as the first Kelmoran ambassador to Earth. I hope to learn more about your people's unpredictability. Jisoo laughed. You'll get plenty of that on Earth, I promise you. Their conversation was interrupted by a station-wide announcement. When it concluded, Tay's expression showed the Kelmoran equivalent of amusement, a slight twitching of his inner eyelids. What was that about? Jisoo asked. The standard emergency broadcast has been updated, Tay explained. It seems fitting, given recent events. What does it say now? Tay's voice took on a formal tone. Emergency broadcast. A human warship has breached our borders, and they come as friends. Jisoo smiled. I like the new version better. Together, they looked out at the stars. The same stars that had brought two very different species together to face a common threat. And somewhere out there, the remnants of the Void Swarm retreated, but both humans and Kelmorans knew they would return. Next time, however, they would face not divided targets, but united resistance. Not isolation, but alliance. Not suspicion, but trust. The human way of war had prevailed this time, but it was the human capacity for friendship that would ensure survival in the battles to come.